We have to talk about the breaking news. You've got a new article about Devin Newman's coming up. We'll discuss it in a second. But let's play some audio first about the breaking news from none other than what shall we call him? I'll leave qualifications out. Andrew McCabe talking to NPR. Cut 4.
Case against you is that you had authorized information to be leaked to the Wall Street Journal. You were asked about it 3 times under oath and sometimes recorded. And the first 2 times you either denied giving the information or gave the sense that you didn't know where the information had come from.
And Steve, it's a well-formed question, but not one that I can answer because of the legal issues that I'm currently still handling.
So this is a man who was at the top of the FBI, who's giving press interviews on a book tour, at the same time admitting that he and the Deputy Attorney General were trying to invoke the 25th Amendment. Alan Dershowitz, preeminent left-wing legal scholar, and Victor Davis Hanson, probably the best, most famous strategic writer and historian we have in America today, both these men used the phrase coup d'etat in the last 48 hours. Sarah Carter, is that overdoing it?
I don't think it's overdoing it at all. In fact, I can remember a year ago, I was using that phrase, that this is a coup, that this is a silent coup within the government. This was coming from informants, people that were in the intelligence community, others who I had spoken with within the FBI. Of course, now we have so much more information, so many more facts, and those facts are coming from the very people that we were actually reporting on years ago, Andrew McCabe being one of the most predominant ones. And now we know from McCabe that he, as well as Rod Rosenstein, and now I know a lot of people say, look, Rod Rosenstein, he's denying that he would have worn a wire to record the president. He's pushing back on Andrew McCabe's statements. They're going after each other now.
Yes.
This is all that's happening. They were together in a room. There were multiple meetings. Sebastian, I know this because I've spoken to sources and I've seen the documents.
Well, even Rosenstein can't deny that there was a meeting to discuss the 25th Amendment. He's just saying, it was a joke.
Yeah, he's trying to say, I was in anger and jest. I said, then I'll just wear a wire. No, he was emphatic. And in fact, the testimony provided by James Baker, who was the general counsel for the FBI, he stated repeatedly that it was no joke, that these were multiple meetings, that they had discussed recording the President of the United States and to invoke the 25th Amendment. That has to be terrifying. Americans have to be so concerned over this because these are armed agents of the federal government that are attempting and discussing invoking the 25th Amendment, which it doesn't apply here whatsoever, on a President of the United States, a duly elected president, behind his back, and have concocted a 2-year investigation based on nothing, not on any solid criminal facts, on nothing. They have concocted this, and I want to know how many other people were actually involved in here, because we're not just looking at Andrew McCabe and Rod Rosenstein, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok. How did John Brennan play into this? I'd like to know. The former head of the CIA. What information was he receiving? What was he doing? James Clapper. Same thing. I'd like to know, because remember, it was James Clapper who was also a leaker. I mean, McCabe's a leaker. We know that now. He was fired for it. He lied
about it multiple times.
Lied multiple times to investigators. Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General's investigators.
Who was appointed by President Obama, who
Correct.
McCabe now calls a partisan hack.
That's right. No, but he was appointed by President Obama, and he's a very straightforward man. And apparently, according to sources that I've spoken with, has been put in the middle of one of the biggest historical events of our modern political history, and he's just trying to get those facts out, those reports. And remember, Michael Horowitz still has a report, the Russia report.
Yes.
And how the FBI, whether there was malfeasance within the FBI, which we know there was now, but how far and how extensive that malfeasance went. And that report is said to be issued sometime this spring, but we can't put a date on it because Horowitz has been very closed. His office has been very discreet about what they're working on and when they will reveal that information. But I know that there's going to be information in there that will be explosive. I think one of the questions that Michael Horowitz has to answer, and one that he may be answering, is whether or not there was a defensive briefing for Hillary Clinton, whether or not Hillary Clinton's campaign was approached by Russians, and whether or not they gave her a defensive briefing. Because what we know now is that the Trump campaign was never given a defensive briefing.
Before we get to that topic, I just want our listeners to be very, very clear on one issue. The 25th Amendment is for when the president is incapacitated, and it requires a majority of the cabinet with the agreement of the vice president to take over the president's duties. It was not written for bureaucrats to use against an elected politician. That is subversion. That is sedition. Nobody elected Andy McCabe. Nobody elected Rod Rosenstein. And that's why the word coup d'etat is utterly and completely justified in this case, and it's historic. Never before in the history of our republic. You're listening to Sara Carter. Follow her on Twitter, Sara Carter DC.
Answer. Consistently conservative voices on AM 1070. The Answer.
To the president, author of the book Why We Fight, Defeating America's Enemies with No Apologies, and the host of the newest national radio show in America on the Salem Radio Network, coming from the ReliefFactor.com studios. And we have in studio, which is always best, Sara Carter, Fox News contributor, and one of the bravest women I know, who actually enjoys going into war zones, crazily, and one of the true investigative journalists left in our nation. I've been saying for about a year and a half now that one of the biggest scandals in America, until we've heard of the 25th Amendment, one of the biggest scandals that's not getting requisite attention is the unmasking scandal, that potentially hundreds of American identities were unmasked by the Obama administration in illegal signals intelligence intercepts. You've just written a piece about this unmasking issue. Could you tell us what you found or what you've heard on Capitol Hill?
Well, I agree with you, first of all, Sebastian, wholeheartedly. I think this is probably one of the biggest stories next to this 25th Amendment story that we haven't heard enough about. And let's just go back. Remember how many unmaskings were discovered by Congress? We first reported on that years ago that Susan Rice, that was the tip of the iceberg,
right,
that Susan Rice had unmasked Americans. Now, unmaskings are extraordinarily rare, just so that the listeners can understand this. Even in the CIA, when a CIA analyst or case officer goes to unmask, it's almost unheard of. In fact, I know a CIA officer that out of 30 years, he only unmasked 2 people.
So let's be clear here. Unmasking is when you're doing intelligence surveillance on foreign enemies, terrorists, or what have you, and an American name pops up, somebody gets into that communication somehow, and they're not relevant to that investigation, but you request, just in case, to rule them out, that their identity be unmasked. An incredibly rare occurrence until the Obama administration.
That's right. And then what we saw, an exponential request for unmaskings. They discovered that Samantha Powers, the
UN ambassador.
A UN ambassador.
Right.
John Bolton, in his entire time as the UN ambassador, only unmasked 3 Americans. 2 of them, he said, he had to beg for that request, for the request to go through to unmask them because it's so
Samantha
rare.
Power, we know how many?
Roughly 300. In fact, Powers tells Trey Gowdy during a hearing, I never made that many unmasking requests. Somebody else must have been signing my name for me on those requests, which means that somebody was falsifying her name. So I asked myself, where did this investigation go? This is extraordinary.
So what's the latest development, Sara Carter?
Latest development is that the ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence,
which sits above the whole intelligence community,
which sits above everyone, as well as the National Security Agency, which was required to set up a repository so that they could review these classified documents. They were ordered by the president over a year ago, never did so, and has never allowed Congress to review these documents.
So the president ordered the intelligence community to create a place where all these unmaskings could be stored together so Congress could look at them.
Absolutely.
And according to Devin Nunes, never happened.
Never happened. They have never been given the access to these documents, and a repository or a classified setting has never been set up so that they could review them. But he did tell me that Congress's intention, and they will go after this, is to force the ODNI and the NSA to do so, and that they will review all those unmaskings within the year.
Now, what's your gut feeling in the last minute we have left here? This isn't, I know Dan Coates. This isn't Dan Coates. This isn't Director of National Intelligence blocking the president. Who's blocking this?
Well, we know who's blocking this within. It's the bureaucrats that have been there from the Obama administration that are playing hardball with Congress. And they think now, because Adam Schiff is chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, that they'll be able to get away with this. We are going to hold them accountable. We are not going to stop until a repository is set up. And I know Congress is going to push and push until they can review all of these unmasking requests.
Yeah, this is the truth of the matter. I saw this when I was in the White House. There's a phenomenon that we called burrowing or tunneling, which is in the last few months of the Obama administration, political appointees were very rapidly converted into civil servants, into SESs, GSs, so that they wouldn't leave or they couldn't be forced out of their positions once the president was inaugurated.
That's right. Embed your army so they can protect you afterwards, right?
So this is the fifth column. The polite word for this is holdovers, but really this is a fifth column that is countering, that is slow rolling the congressional oversight function that is required by law of the intelligence community. You've been listening to Sara Carter. Follow her on Twitter, Sara Carter DC, and also her website, sarah8carter.com, one of the few true investigative journalists left in America.